You know, pretty much every workplace in America is supposed to have an emergency action plan, or an EAP. But let's be honest, having a binder collecting dust on a shelf is not the same as being prepared. So today, we're going to put that preparedness to the test with a quiz pulled straight from OSHA's own rules. Let's see if your workplace is really ready for when things go sideways.
All right, let's kick things off with a real stumper. This is the question that trips up almost everybody. I'm talking even veteran safety professionals. Does that plan always have to be in writing? Does it depend on the state? Give it some thought, because this one little detail, well, it changes everything.
So believe it or not, the answer is 10. According to OSHA standard 29 CFR 1910.38, if you have 10 or fewer employees, you can actually communicate your plan orally. But the second you hire that 11th person, boom, it has got to be in writing. And it makes sense, right? With a tiny team, you can get everyone together and give clear verbal instructions. Any bigger than that, and the risk of chaos and messages getting lost just goes through the roof.
Hey, if that number caught you by surprise, don't worry about it. You're definitely not alone, and you're in the perfect place. This isn't just about acing a quiz. It's about really understanding the rules that save lives when it counts. So let's get you prepared.
So here's our game plan. We've already knocked out that first big test. Next up, we're going to do a super fast briefing on the core things every EAP has to have. Then we'll dive headfirst into the main quiz, put that knowledge to work in a real-world scenario, and wrap up with a key question you should be asking at your next safety meeting.
Okay, before we jump into the rest of the quiz, let's make sure we've got a solid foundation. In the next minute and a half, we're going to cover the absolute must-know basics of a compliant emergency action plan. So what is an EAP, really? It's way more than just a fire escape map taped to the wall, you know? The best way to think about it is like a strategic playbook for chaos. When an emergency hits, a fire, a spill, whatever, this document tells everyone exactly what to do, where to go, and how to do it safely.
And look, OSHA is super clear about what has to be in this plan. There are 6 mandatory non-negotiable elements. Every single EAP has to cover these: how you report the emergency, your evacuation routes, who's responsible for shutting down critical machines, how you count everyone to make sure they're out safe, which is huge, who performs rescue duties, and who the point of contact is for more information. Miss just one and your plan is out of compliance. And here's that rule we started with, laid out plain and simple. Got 10 or fewer employees? You can explain the plan verbally. But once you have 11 or more, it has to be a physical document, or at least a digital one, that's kept right there in the workplace, available for any employee to look at whenever they want.
Now this is huge. An EAP is not a set it and forget it kind of deal. It's a living document. OSHA says you have to review it with every employee at 4 key moments: when you first create it, on an employee's first day, when their role in the plan changes, like they become a floor warden, and anytime you make changes to the plan itself.
All right, foundation's set. Briefing's over, you've got the essentials down. Now let's really put that knowledge to the test with the official quiz. See if you can get the answer before I give it away.
Okay, question 1. Let's really lock this in. We touched on it, but it's so foundational, it's worth asking again. What is that magic number of employees that triggers the requirement for a written plan?
And the answer is 11 or more. And here's a key detail a lot of people miss from the standard. It's per facility, not per company. So you could have a company with 50 employees, but if they're spread out over 6 small locations with less than 10 people each, technically, each of those places could have an oral plan.
All right, moving on to question 2. We just went over this in our briefing. How many of those core, absolute minimum elements does OSHA require in every single EAP?
Yep, the answer's 6. These are the bedrock of your plan: reporting, evacuation, critical shutdown, accounting for people, rescue duties, and a contact person. If your plan is missing even one of these, it just isn't compliant. Simple as that.
Okay, this next one is so important, because in a real emergency, you can't just hope for the best. You need a plan for people. So who does OSHA say must be officially designated and trained to help others get out safely, especially folks who might need a little extra help?
And the answer is that this specific employees have to be designated and trained for this. This isn't about hoping a good Samaritan steps up. This is a formal assignment. It's often done with evacuation wardens or a buddy system where someone is pre-assigned to help a specific coworker. It's designed to completely eliminate that bystander effect during a crisis.
All right, let's see what you remember. A plan is useless if nobody knows about it. So give me at least 2 of the 3 specific times you're legally required to review the EAP with an employee. Okay, the 3 big ones are
upon initial hiring so they know the drill from day one, when their specific duties under the plan change, like being made a floor warden, and anytime the plan itself is updated. These checks make sure everyone is always on the same, most current page.
Here we go. A classic true or false that really gets to a dangerous assumption a lot of workplaces make. Is it true that as long as the safety folks and the managers know the plan, you're good to go?
Oh, that is absolutely 100% false. A plan that only a few people know is basically a recipe for disaster. Every single employee covered by the plan has to be trained on their role and the procedures they need to follow. The receptionist needs to know their evacuation route just as much as the floor warden needs to know how to sweep an area.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the hardware. You need to tell everyone to get out, now. How do you do it? Besides the standard fire alarm you pull on the wall, what other kinds of alarm systems does OSHA say are okay to use?
You might be surprised by some of these. For really small workplaces, just yelling the instructions is fine. But OSHA also gives the green light to things like steam whistles, air horns, strobe lights for noisy areas, and even tactile devices that vibrate for employees who are hearing or visually impaired. The number one rule is that the alarm has to be perceivable. It has to cut through the normal noise and light of the workplace.
All right, this is about the absolute basics of a good evacuation. Why do we tell everyone to meet at a specific spot? You know, the flagpole out front or the big tree across the street. What's the single most important reason for having that assembly point?
The number one reason, and this is non-negotiable, is to account for every single person. It's all about the head count. That assembly point creates a safe area where supervisors can do a roll call and confirm that nobody got left behind. Without that, you can't tell the fire department whether everyone's out or if they need to risk their lives starting a search and rescue.
Here's another one I hear all the time. People mix these two up constantly. So, true or false? An EAP and a fire prevention plan, or FPP, are the same thing in the eyes of OSHA.
Big false on that one. They are totally different documents under totally different rules. Here's the easiest way to think about it. The EAP is about response, what you do when the emergency is already happening. The fire prevention plan is about prevention, all the steps you take to stop that fire from ever starting in the first place. Okay, last quiz question before we get to our big scenario. We know when to train employees on the plan, but how often does the employer need to review and update the document itself? Annually? Every few years? What does the rule say?
So here's the trick. There's no set schedule like once a year. Instead, the plan has to be updated whenever something important changes. That could be a new chemical hazard, a change in the building layout like a new wall goes up, or, and this is the big one, after any drill or actual emergency. You have to debrief, figure out what went wrong, and then update the plan so you don't make the same mistake twice.
Okay, quiz is done. But knowing the answers is one thing, applying them is another. So let's put it all together in a real-world scenario. We're going to build a compliant EAP from the ground up for a 45-person office using everything we just learned.
So here's the situation. Picture a 45-person office. They've got the basics, fire extinguishers on the wall, but no actual written EAP. They are way out of compliance. So what exactly are the steps they need to take to get right with OSHA?
Step 1, and it's the big one. They have 45 employees, so that's way over the 10-person limit. That plan must be in writing, no exceptions. They need to draft a document that hits all 6 of those core elements we talked about: how to report an emergency, evacuation maps, who shuts down what, assembly points for the head count, defining rescue duties, and naming a contact person.
Okay, next up, you have to assign jobs. In a crisis, you can't have people just guessing what to do. They need to formally designate and train employees to help lead the evacuation. A really good rule of thumb, which OSHA actually suggests, is 1 warden for every 20 employees. So for this office, that means training 2 or 3 people as wardens who get extra instruction on the building layout and how to help others. All right, the plan's written, key people are trained. Now it's time for the all-hands-on-deck meeting. You've got to train every single person. And I don't mean just sending an email. I mean a formal review where you go over the alarm signals, the evacuation routes from their specific desks, and exactly what's expected of them. And finally, step 4 is remembering that this never really ends. It's a cycle. From this point on, every new person who walks in the door gets trained on the plan. If they move the office around, they update the plan. And while OSHA doesn't demand a certain number of drills, best practice says you have to do them regularly. A drill is the only way to find out if your plan actually works when the pressure's on.
Phew,
we've covered a ton of ground here, right? From that tricky 10-employee rule, all the way to building a plan from zero. Now let's bring it all home to your own workplace.
So I'm going to leave you with this one last question to take back with you. After everything we've talked about, does your EAP just exist, or is it understood? Do people really know their roles? Have you truly planned for everyone? Is it a living document, or is it just a piece of paper?
Look, if you found this helpful and you want to keep learning about how to make your workplace safer, do us a favor and subscribe to HSE Study. Thanks for your time today, and please be safe out there.